to, and good afternoon and welcome to the Prevention Corner. My name is Rich Coleman. Tonight we are going to introduce you to a good friend of mine, Mr. Ron Wiedbush, who we've done tremendous work here in Washington County through our schools and his role as the Safe Schools Principal for the Ypsilanti Public Schools for many years and retired and then came back. But we're going to talk about an incredible endeavor that he's involved with Storm, and you're going to get a chance to meet Storm. Storm is quite an incredible story with working with Ron and an injury that he had, but then it's expanded to work with families, work with our veterans, work with our school children, work with a lot of different formats that Ron and Storm have been so blessed to be involved with. But one of the other important things that just happened is Ron and Storm were recognized with a presidential commendation. Ron, welcome to the program.
Welcome. Thank you, Richie, for having me. And I consider this a pleasure when you and I can actually sit down and talk for a moment, because we're usually seeing each other at major events, and we just kind of smile as we both take care of the functions we're assigned to. And it's really exciting for me to update you on what is going on in Storm's life and my life and how it's affected a lot of those with special needs here in not just Washington County, but Southeast Michigan. At times, sometimes when something of a negative nature happens, we may get into a self-pity mode or start to feel, why did this happen to us? And due to the support of my charming wife and my family and some really good close friends, we've taken something that could be considered a deficit and turned it into something that is actually, from my perspective, one of the best and most rewarding parts of my personality, and that's being humbled and understanding the fact that sometimes the big guy upstairs has reasons for changing some things around, and it really allows you to use your strengths and talents to help those other people to be able to have some of the joys that we have here in our United States, and to go out there and to be productive members of our society. So I'm very happy to be here, and thank you once again for bringing me here to Prevention Corner.
Well, you know, what's been great about our relationship is we have been together 20 plus years. 20 plus years. Working with substance abuse awareness, with at-risk issues in our schools and in the community. The Red Ribbon Campaign, the Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Seasonally, we've been involved with a lot of these efforts to bring this information, these resources to our families and to our communities at all different levels. The schools, our faith communities, our schools, our neighborhood watch groups. We've done a lot of work to do that, and you retired, what, 7 years ago?
7 years ago, after 32 years already. That big 6-0 is just around the corner. But what is interesting, because I've had some younger administrators that I've mentored, they wonder how you can run cooperatively with someone, respect and cherish the successes they have, and use their successes of your friends to help your organizations achieve a success itself. And a lot of times it goes back a lot to your upbringing, my upbringing, our faith-based, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that we know sometimes by pulling energy and strengths together, those forces are a lot stronger to accomplish the goal than just one. You mentioned the Red Ribbon Campaign. With the support of, you know, Pittsfield, our district, and Ypsilanti and Ann Arbor, and bringing in different groups of students who never even worked before on campaigns, with the special needs students getting out there on the front line. We passed out.
Now wait a minute, before you lead up to schools, tell us which schools. We had Ypsi schools.
We were involved. We were involved with our Ypsilanti schools in Ann Arbor. We were involved with the schools that are in our extended Forest Avenue, which is a county-wide based school for all those with some specific needs. And we drew in a lot of help from those specifically in the, you mentioned faith-based and organizations, And the veterans groups, the Red Ribbon Campaign this year, as recognized by Lansing when they came down, passed out pretty close to 20,000. That's a lot of zeros. 20,000 red ribbons. And when we had our information shared back with our liaison officers, the students can be very proud of themselves that there were 0 fatalities during our Red Ribbon Campaign time that were alcohol related here in Washtenaw County. That's something to be proud of. And as I mentioned, we empowered the students. We empowered the different groups because they themselves are out there unsupervised a lot at those holiday parties, the driving here and there, and they consciously made the decision not to have alcohol involved with them. And a lot of the parents actually, when they saw the maturation level of their students, kind of were blown away, wondering when did this all kick in? It's not like just turning on a 1980s teenage movies about party, party, party. They found alternative ways. And one of the most exciting things that we did have happen is that when a lot of our kids did canvassing and passing out the ribbons, we had stories told and stories told. And you'll remember the one story that was at our campaign 2 years ago when our fire marshal was there. And at that time in his life, about 20 years ago, he was a first responder person with the fire department.
Amazing.
And the one secretary who just retired from us a year ago, her daughter was the one who was involved in that alcohol-related accident. And our fire marshal at that time, he was the one first on hand
on the scene.
And was able to make sure the young lady's last few moments here on Earth were peaceful and knows that she was loved.
That was amazing.
You know,
that interaction occurred that
sometimes
day.
it was hard to hold back tears a lot because we did not plan that.
No.
And as I mentioned earlier, a lot of things that we plan in our life do get changed. And when those things do get changed, you have to sit back and look at them and say, well, am I going to just roll over? Am I going to just do it haphazardly, or am I going to rise to the occasion to still make some big differences?
Yeah, that's amazing. Let's talk about Storm. Let's talk about how this whole process kind of evolved, and because one of the first big endeavors that we were involved with the FBI, that acronym, people will think, you know, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, but that's not what this is.
No, Storm is a rarity with the fact that he has had 5 very heavily certified animal trainers, dog trainers. The first group that worked with him right here in the Washtenaw County area, and it is now called PAWS, which is Puppies Are Awesome, Wonderful Sidekicks. Amber's out of Chelsea. And she saw the spirit, the heart, and the genetic background that Storm brought to the table. And she worked coming to our house diligently during that first year to teach him so many things that most of the other trainers would think had to wait for additional maturation and aging. She worked with us pertaining to some simple thing as, let's talk about the barking. She taught him that he was only allowed to bark on his own specific privacy. Nobody, including yourself, has ever heard Storm bark.
You know what?
Storm sees close to 20,000 people most days, and no one has ever heard Storm bark. He has a bark that is very much demand of your attention, and it was very adorable last March when we had that big blue moon, when our rotation was close enough that made it look much larger. He wanted to be outside, and his whole historical genetics came back where he was smiling, and we did hear a couple, ooh. But all the things in people's lives that I touched, sometimes you don't realize the simple things that make a difference in a person's day or a person's year that help get them through. yourself and myself were running and running and touching so many people's lives every day. And sometimes we don't realize what that smile, that handshake, that slow down moment of time means to some people, specifically if they're going through some rough times.
Yeah.
Once I realized that I was no longer going to be the person that I was in a pretty horrific car accident where my head and windshield area made real good contact. That was before they had the airbags.
Yes.
And I broke the C5, 6, 7 straight through, along with 16 other bones. And I've always been thankful for the staff at St. Joe's. They did a nice job on putting me back together. But at that time, you know, the medical field was not at this perspective it is today. And the automobiles are not there. My new safety van has, I think, 5 airbags in it.
Yeah.
And we didn't even have airbags that time. We had that cross belt, and some had the harness. And thinking I was always Superman, the body, I thought, healed itself completely. And, you know, we went out there and took on the world and did all the programs and dealt with the gang task force and made some big changes with all those things. But about 4.5 years ago now, all of a sudden in 1 week, I was falling down the stairs, our bedroom stairs, multitude of times, up to 6 times 1 week. And my wife thought, wow, you must be extremely tired out or something else is going on. And we found out that some of my body parts were encapsulated with the nerves, and my brain was sending signals, but they were not reaching it to the extremities that were needed.
Yeah.
And at that time, as I was starting my safety company after I retired, Storm was going to be my first employee to help with search and rescue and be out there in the community in a multitude of ways to safeguard our children.
Yeah.
But once that happened, his changing career did go through a different path. And once he worked with our first trainer, Amber, and he went through all his canine good citizen training, she directed me to 2 young ladies who you mentioned from the FBI, and that was for Better Independence, and they're out of the Williamsburg area.
Okay.
Both of the trainers have 20+ years of experience, and they saw Storm and they were a little bit speechless. Very few people actually see a large white straight-back shepherd. Storm, all the way up. Storm is a rarity in the fact, all the way up. He's 132 pounds of all the way up. He's been resting, been working all day. He saw about 15,000 people a day between the camps and the schools and the summer programs. But he has the straight back versus the drop hip.
Yeah.
He's pure muscle. He's a protein eater. He does not eat anything with grain. And because I was going to need a dog to lift and block and move me, we needed a dog that was going to be strong enough to hold upwards of almost 300 pounds at times. So the team from the FBI started to train him in all his specific areas of service work, and they also went on to spend a lot of time on molding that affective personality.
Right.
Storm has never even been allowed to play tug-of-war. Everything that Storm does is gentle and kind to work towards helping people. Now, one thing that's unique about Storm is they trained him to respect the proximity that he's in. So if I put him into a down position such as right like this, and I just give him a smile and tell him he's all right, it doesn't matter what I do or say, he won't break position. So if we're out in a crisis situation, any type of contact can happen to him, he will not break position because he knows that I have him there for a reason.
Yeah.
It could be for holding medication.
Yeah.
It could be holding specific things that we need to be able to safeguard. And another thing that he has been taught to do when he's in down position, and I'm going to embarrass one of our audience members. Could I have one of, would you like me to, could you call me an audience member on up?
You're Alex. Come on over.
Alex, we're going to pretend you're a lot younger than you are. And Storm has been very blessed to be working with a lot of the children in the area who have had some very traumatic experiences as they're young. And sometimes parents, when they're having rough days, take out their frustration on the children, and the little ones do not handle being touched by humans very well.
Right.
They do that bridge back and that startle and the scream. So Storm was trained by some very key people from some of our social agencies how to take the child back to its mother's womb time. And I'm going to have you, as I slide over, just kind of sit between Storm's legs, and we're going to pretend you're only about 6 months old, so I'll give you a little more room. And I'm going to move my legs. I'm going to have you put your bottom where your shoes are, and we're going to have you, and I'm going to have you gently put your head back onto his cape. Just lay back. And what Storm does is he cradles them. Perfect. He cradles them and holds them and locks the legs around them. And the child can hear the heartbeat, they feel the warmth, they feel the love, takes them back to the security of being still with the mom in the body, no connection, no violence. And when the baby starts to relax, it relaxes on a multitude of levels, starts to rebuild the trust, and there the baby feels the heart, the warmth, the love, the nurturing, and we start them on over. And we've had success with a multitude of children to be able to get them back out there being accepting and loving of other people in their lives. And we're going to give you a big hand. Isn't he nice and warm?
He is.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Back up, Storms. Now, people are amazed when they say that, because, you know, we read about these cases out there in society where, you know, families have some very ferocious things happen to kids, and people wonder, how do you get them past?
Right.
You cannot put a child under 1 year old into psycho counseling. You cannot put them into any type of social work type of counseling. So what they do is very, 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 very based upon the instincts that the children are at that time. When they were first born, they felt that security. They heard that heartbeat. They felt that warmth. They felt that continual factor of not having the care of something negatively coming at them. And when you were laying down, you felt his warmth, you felt his heart, you felt him hold you, you felt that cradling, and I'll tell you what, it just changes the child around. And I never even knew that there was this ability in canines or other animals to take our kids and get them back on focused.
So tell me, I know that you also do work with our military personnel at the VA.
Well, I'll tell you.
I know we've got
so much.
Watch our time, how much time we have, but
Right.
I want to touch on that, because as we work with the VA hospital and the post-traumatic stress syndrome,
Well, I'll tell you.
a number of our military families are addressing and dealing with. Talk to us about what you do with our military personnel.
Well, my wife, Storm, and myself are very active with our Patriot Guard riders. We get called up in emails about mission statements to go out there and show respect to families of young servicemen and women coming home from combat duty, young men and women coming back home who are injured, and the sad parts are young men and women coming back after they've given the ultimate sacrifice of their life. Storm is one of the first civilians or prototype people to greet those people off the plane.
Wow.
We've had Bishop Airport in Flint, the airport by Midland, Detroit, all over the place. They come off the plane. Most of the time they give mom or dad a hug, or their girlfriend or boyfriend a hug, but half the time they see Storm, they come running up to him, and they're on the ground with him hugging and kissing, and they have the home front feeling. But we have to get them information out on how to deal with a lot of our veterans who are coming home still with part of the war with them.
Absolutely. They
The
really are.
post-traumatic stress syndrome is something that we do have to address, because of the fact that we are still sending our youngsters into combative areas.
Yes, we are.
And whenever you're out there dealing with that situation, it is not just your physical training, it's also your mental training that helps keep you sharp. But when your tour of duty is up It doesn't necessitate when you turn in that uniform, turn in that weapon, that you also can turn in the luggage that you're carrying in your mind. I brought something to share with you and your audience, and that's why I was so excited when you brought me aboard tonight, is that I'm not sure if you're aware of it or any of your audiences. Everybody's so into these new iPhones with all these different apps.
Right.
The Department of Defense and the Federal Veterans Administration now have a post-traumatic stress disorder AMP that the veterans can download on their iPhone, and when they are having a memory stressful moment right after a nightmare, they can hit that app and it puts them directly in contact with supportive people from the mental health field.
We're going to be putting this app website and address up on the screen so that our veterans' families can get access to this information. In a future program, we will have one of the representatives from the VA hospital that will be talking more about our local programs. But I had not heard about this app. This is fantastic.
Well, I'm here because you and myself always want to get the most current information out. This was just downloaded off of the net this afternoon with the current. There's been over 5,000 successful interventions based upon post-traumatic service disorders taking place where veterans have been able to get help, so they are not out there alone and possibly make a negative decision about what they do with themselves or towards their families.
Let me interject something here as well, because one of the things we've done with this research as we've been working with the VA, I had an alarming statistic that came across my desk at the Department of Public Safety last year, and this is still true today, that we are experiencing 1,000 suicide attempts a month from returning veterans from these two theaters of war. And one of the things that, as we're working with the VA and our elected officials, that we are going to be inviting our faith community, our schools, all of our parent groups into some of these discussions to learn how to help their loved ones as they come home. We're also, one of the things that's occurring with law enforcement, and this is something that's happening nationwide, they're creating a special perspective through the court system so that the courts can work with families. The number one thing that we're seeing that unfortunately falls under the umbrella of our response from a law enforcement perspective has been domestic violence. And instead of charging individuals with incidents of domestic violence, there are different avenues that they are streamlining in the veterans instead of charging them with domestic violence. And I think that is so critically important for us to, and again, this is all new information that's just coming down the pipe.
Cutting edge, and that's why we're here.
Here in Washtenaw County, here nationwide, but just recently here in Washtenaw County, our chiefs of police and directors of public safeties have had meetings with the VA, and hopefully we're going to have a lot of information that we can help get out when we have the VA on the program. So this is really, really important.
Well, let me share this with you, is that the veterans who, or even active duty soldiers who have downloaded this app, it's not just those that have come back from their tour of duty and are here stateside. They have had service requests by our active soldiers from over 25 different countries. 25 different countries. And this information, unless through all the resources and connections that I have, can't get out to the public until, you and I slow down and say, listen, friends, there's other surfaces. These new phones and these apps are not just for ordering your pizzas or taking your vacations. These apps can actually save a person's life, and these apps can actually work with those so they can get in connection with people who understand that the military view of mental health and the American Disabilities Act view of mental health are quite different from one another. When you look at the fact is that the ADA is a civil rights issue, ADA uses different standards than the military and the Department of Veterans Affairs does. The American Disability Acts, with all the changes that just went through with President Obama changing this last year, is a whole more encompassing act that went through with our first President Bush, or went through the changes 2.5 years ago. This gives so many more people the whole aspect of not having discrimination based upon a limitation.
Right.
And there are so many ways, as you mentioned, that some people, because of the post-traumatic syndrome, have been put into the wrong location, the wrong method of handling, because if you'll notice, and we talked about Storm's calmness, when someone is having a revisit to a combat area or a traumatic experience, and Richie, you know this about myself, I've buried over 80 kids in my career. When you and I worked together with the gang task forces between 94 and 98, we were out there all the time. And I know what has affected me, and I know how it's affected the relationships I'm in. Could you imagine multiplying that by thousands of times? And the canines that are being trained to go out there and work and try to stabilize, because not every veteran we know is going to be at a place where they have the accessibility of the app with communication towers. Not everybody can use them at times because it could be pinpoint and triangulated to get them possibly into hurt or problems. But the canines, when they're trained to be loving and caring like Storm is, it develops some consistency and routine to the day. The canine greets them in the morning. It gets them up. It makes them understand there's a purpose for life each day. If they wake up and they have a nightmare and they're in a cold sweat or a shake or being aggressive, they see their canine service post-traumatic dog next to them. They see that they're calm, they're reassured, the issue is not going on. The dream or the nightmare was real to them while they're sleeping, but once they wake up, they realize that the canine can focus and center them. They get them out to the community, they keep them stabilized, they put structure to the day, and you know what? It gives them that connection that they've lost due to what they've experienced.
That right there is the most important.
This whole factor, and there's so much to share with Storm and all the different things, but you know, we have family members who are recovering from wounds in Afghanistan, and we take this personal, and that's why I wanted to bring this cutting-edge information into you.
Because Ron, let's do this, because one of the things that I'm going to make sure that we do is we're going to put this information up on the screen so that you will see the websites for the application.
I'll leave this right with you, my friend.
For the information regarding the post-traumatic stress. The VA has a designated website just for the post-traumatic stress syndrome and the services that they provide that we're going to put up on the screen. We got just a few minutes left, and we can't leave without talking about your award. Well, Storm just received an award, a presidential commendation that was pretty exciting to see over all of our media sources.
It's, I'm blessed. And I mentioned, you know, Storm's wonderful trainers, a young gal by the name of Lori out of Paradise Dog Training. She brought out and amplified everything else that the trainers from search and water rescue and therapy work brought together. And when I share with people the fact that Storm sees up to 20,000 people some days between the schools, hospitals, and anniversaries, their heads and their mouths just drop. He is able to change the climate of almost any type of negative situation by being there. And when we were informed through the points of light that when they tabulated up all the visitations we did in the last 18 months, I had no real idea that we did 2,100 plus hours of documented volunteer work giving back to others. That's not work, and that's not things that are structured where you're running events. That's giving back to others through closed drives for the veterans, working with the closed shelters for our domestic violence sources, working with the special needs.
We're going to have to wrap up here real short. But when you went to Washington? To
We
get the
received,
award, was it presented to you?
it was presented to us out at our Vietnam Memorial.
Memorial, okay.
And the pictures that Storm has been on
And
the
we're
paper
going to have
with.
those up on the screen as well, because I had those. Those are great
We
pictures.
had some real humor because we will most likely run into President Obama as he comes through here in Michigan
Yes.
for his campaign. We do know that his whole family are canine dog lovers.
Yes, they are.
They have.
Yeah,
We all
yeah.
heard about the first dog.
Yeah.
But what I'd like to complete and kind of finish on is that I don't view the recognition by our president is something that falls upon Storm or myself. Because if you put both of our hours together, that's close to 4,200 hours in 18 months. The average person, that's something that they can't do. But they need to slow down, because if they see someone who's having a rough day, and it may be one of our former veteran friends, their acts of kindness can change specific situations so immensely. And people need to sometimes take that breath, rethink what things are going on, leave that judgmental attitude behind, and just take some time to care again.
Well, Ron, I tell you what, we're wrapping up now with our program for today. We are going to do this part 2. We're going to have to do this again.
Well, I just thought it was so important that you learned about this app,
Yeah.
because you're so heavily involved with the veterans groups, myself through the Patriot Hours and all the work we do with our volunteer services up at the Getty Road facilities. We have to pair up again,
Absolutely.
fly solo next to each other, get more information out, and your show reaches thousands of people across the country, and everybody's going to be hitting out there on this specific web page after we're up. And you know what? If what you and I presented tonight, if one of our veterans or one of our active duty people download that app and it makes a difference at that, it meant giving up time away from my family and friends tonight to be here with you, my secondary family, okay?
I tell you what, Ron, we go back a long way, and on behalf of all of Washington County and our prevention personnel all of these years, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for what you've done.
Thank you for having
and
Storm
all of the
and
work
myself.
that you have done with bringing Storm on board and the outreach to our community in all facets and all phases.
I'll tell you what, a lot of people, they do not understand that Storm has just changed so many people's lives by being a kind, gentle giant. And the biggest thing about strength and size is knowing when to be humbled and kind.
Yeah.
And that's something that our whole philosophy is about. So thank you.
And on that note, we thank you so much for tuning in to the Prevention Corner tonight. We're going to put information up about Storm and the FBI and all of the groups that Ron is working with, the resources that we've discussed tonight regarding the Veterans Administration, and the applications that you can download on your smartphone so that you will have this for you and your family. But most of all, we thank Ron and Storm and all of those groups that he's working with for their tremendous outreach and to the community. My name is Rich Coleman. I'm here at the host for the Prevention Corner tonight with my good friend Ron Wiedbush.
Thank you.
Thank you again. We will see you at the next episode of the Prevention Corner. Thank you so much. Send us an email. Let us know what you think. Hit me up at preventioncorner@writeme.com. Thank you so much.